Okay, now we're good. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. How was lunch? Good? For about another. Got a little problem. In and out. What's up? Oh, no. All right, let's give this a go again. Okay. Sorry about the snafu. Good afternoon. I'm the CEO of. It's cutting in and out. Good. Oh, now it's on. Watch. Nope. Now it's off. Now it's on. Okay. I'm used to public humiliation. Now we're on. Okay. Those few minutes will probably be more entertaining than anything I'm going to say. But I'll start again. I'm Frank Giamenco. I guess all of you know that by now. I'm President and CEO of First Vision Media Group, and I'd like to welcome you on behalf of myself and my co-host, Dr. Ron Bloom, to our second annual Future in Focus Innovation Showcase. We're featuring new emerging technologies that have the potential to change our industry in interesting and dramatic ways. At last year's event, we presented 8 new innovators and received an outstanding response from you folks in the audience. We'll be updating you on the progress of those original 8 programs, but we promise to bring you even more groundbreaking inventions that we hope will leave you a little surprised and maybe more than a little challenged. As we said last year, prepare to be amazed. Now, as I was preparing this, I recognized that 15 years ago this week, I started my company, First Vision Media Group. And I started it on the premise that we couldn't have enough trade magazines in the optical business. And while I'm certainly proud of that achievement, what occurred to me is that, you look at a decade and a half and you realize that that's such a short period of time. Or so you might think. But consider what... I'm back. No? Okay. All right. So consider what's happened since the turn of the century. The smartphone, the tablet, the smartwatch, and many other wearables have been introduced. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and a host of other social media giants were born. App-driven companies like Uber and Airbnb constantly are now making headlines. We email, we download, we Skype, we Google, and we Snapchat every day. These are words that didn't appear in our lexicon in 1999. And floppy disks, CD-ROMs, and even flash drives have been replaced by the cloud. In the blink of an eye, the 21st century has unfolded right before us. Now, the optical industry has finally begun to keep pace with where we are as a culture in terms of innovation. No aspect of the ophthalmic care delivery system, from refraction to dispensing to vision correction through prosthetics or surgery, has not been touched by new methodologies and associated products. And they're just in time, because our industry's health isn't in question, but growth has certainly slowed. I think we've all seen and experienced that over the last 2 decades, and profitability, particularly at the ECP level, is under a lot of pressure. We think that some of the things you're going to see and hear about today have the potential to reignite significant optical growth and take our industry in very new directions. In fact, that's one of the reasons we created Future in Focus to begin with, to give new industry ideas a forum that can surely stimulate growth in the coming years. We applaud you all for attending and making this possible. Now, I'm going to invite Dr. Ron Bloom up to address you in a couple minutes, but I just wanted to do a couple of housekeeping things, as they say. Of the 5 innovations you're going to see today, we'll be presenting awards to 2 of them for most innovative and most poised for success. And if you notice at your places, you have a ballot form, a judging form. And so we'd like you to select those 2 companies and those 2 individuals that you think fit the bill. Okay, we've also provided you with some note paper on the table so that if you want to send questions up to the panelists at the conclusion of their discussion, you can do so. And then lastly, of course, is an evaluation form on the meeting itself. And we ask that you take a few minutes at the end and just tell us what you think and how you feel the meeting went, regardless of what happened with my microphone. Okay, we'll have 2 breaks. They're going to be brief, about 15 minutes apiece, one at 2:30 and one at 4. I just wanted a picture of myself smiling up here. And they're sponsored by the shop, DSP. And at 5:15, we're going to have a cocktail reception where everybody can network, speakers and audience can commingle, and that's going to be brought to us by Care Credit. In addition to those 2 sponsors, we'd like to extend thanks to Dorsey & Whitney and Pogotech, our platinum sponsors, as well as AdLens Focus and the Vision Council for sponsoring, respectively, our badges and our event journals. Thanks, guys. And without further ado, Dr. Ron Bloom calls himself a serial entrepreneur and a staunch believer in the power of positive inventing. He's the founder, president, and chairman of Vision Care Inventing, a company that fosters entrepreneurship within the optical field. He started over 10 companies, and he holds more than 500 patents as the inventor or co-inventor, and is at work on a new project even as we speak. So it's my pleasure to invite up my co-host, Dr. Ron Bloom.
Thank you, Frank. I don't know whether to say that. Can everybody in the back hear me okay? So I'm coming through okay? Good. I guess I'm glad that Frank went first. So please forgive me, Frank. Good morning, everybody. I appreciate you being here. It's not lost on Frank and I that you had to come early. Many of you had to come to Vegas early, 1 or 2 days early to be here. So we're going to do our best today to make it worth your while. Let me advance this now to the next screen here. Let's talk about growth in the U.S. optical industry. These visuals were pretty much a surprise to me. I don't know if they'll be a surprise to you all or not. But the growth obviously is healthy. We're talking about a mature industry, correct? But the growth is really pretty anemic. And sometimes we, have to step back and look at things and be honest with ourselves. So I want to take a minute to walk you through some visuals that, for me personally, were pretty eye-opening. In order to resolve and help the industry really take off again, like it did in the early days. You know, my premise today is that innovation is very important for us to embrace, and I'm going to walk you through that. But let me now take you through the industry. Let's talk about frames. Over the last 14 years, this is Vision Council data, and I went back and we looked at it, and if we've done our math correct, in the frame industry, the year-to-year growth average is 0.7%. That's pretty surprising, isn't it? If we move on and we look at lenses, over the last 14 years, the lens growth has been on an average 1.5%. You know, that's not, again, I'm not trying to in any way, shape, or form diminish the importance of the optical industry at all. I'm just trying to show everybody that we live in a very mature industry that's been around for a long time. We all know that. But the industry growth, it's not what I would consider to be stellar. It's that of a very mature industry. Surprisingly to me, the part of the industry that has grown the fastest over the last 14 years has been the contact lens industry, the use of contact lenses. That did surprise me, because when I think about the size of the contact lens industry versus the other segments of the industry, I didn't really believe that contact lenses would have shown that kind of growth. If we look at Plano sunglasses, it's 2.1% per year. Is this surprising you all, or does everybody in the audience know this? I mean, it was a little bit of a surprise to me. I see some people shaking their heads and agreeing with me. If you look at eye exams, the U.S. eye examinations year to year is 3.1%. So let's talk about innovation. Let's talk about how we can cause the industry to take off and grow at a faster clip. And everybody's going to benefit, everybody. And of course, the larger companies will probably benefit the most because they would get the largest share probably of that growth. So first is, what is desirable? This is a different way of looking at innovation. You know, what is desirable to users? Well, you've probably heard there's many different ways people talk about this, but the mother of innovation is need or necessity, right? So, you know, what is desirable to others is one component that creates innovation. Another component is what is possible with technology. And today, and this is the world that I've played in the last 25 years, I think everybody knows I'm educated as an optometrist, but since 1989 I've been doing one startup company after another and always pushing the envelope when it comes to technology. In today's world, pretty much with the exception of anti-gravity, if you can dream it, you can almost do it. If you have the right amount of dollars and you surround yourself with the right people and you have the right amount of time, you can pretty much do it. So another segment of innovation is what is possible with technology. And the third one, which is one that quite candidly is the most difficult for me, is what is viable in the marketplace. Timing is everything when it comes to innovation. And timing is everything when it comes to a lot of things we do in business, right? I've been out there where I've been 15 years too early. And when you're 15 years too early, you feel good when you look in the mirror, but it doesn't do anything to your wallet. This is just a different way of looking at innovation, and let's talk about different forms of, different types of innovation. There's incremental. It's small, but it's meaningful. And think about the first flat top bifocal. And then somebody came along and said, well, I think I'll curve the edges and I'll make it into a curved top. That's incremental innovation. Let's talk about breakthrough innovation. My friends from Messler up here on the right, think about progressive addition lenses. You could argue that that's transformational. Some you all probably would do that. You can also argue that it's a breakthrough. But nevertheless, it really ignited and changed and helped our industry. I think everybody would agree to that. And then let's talk about transformational innovation. Let's talk about something that totally changes the rules, changes everything, shakes everything up, causes everybody in this room to perhaps, lay awake at night for, a few nights. And a fellow way in the back table who will talk later today, his name's Bill Burns with Encore Vision, is doing eye drops for presbyopia. And if the eye drops work as they hope they will, that's going to really change the dynamics of our industry. So that's transformational innovation. Now most transformational innovation comes from the outside. It doesn't, it sometimes comes from the inside, but most transformational comes from the outside. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because it's very, very important for our industry to embrace young entrepreneurs, young startup companies, and individuals that have ideas that come from the outside. Because it's those ideas that are really going to change the industry, and it's those ideas that will cause that growth, that anemic growth that I showed you, to start taking off like a rocket ship again. So catching the next wave is very important. There's a visual that I wish I had, but I'm going to describe it with my hands very quickly. And that is, if you look at electronic wearable devices are growing like this. It's a huge, huge wave that's coming at us. And if we're smart as an industry, we're going to embrace electronic wearable devices, because electronic wearable devices on eyewear, there's no better place for them. And if there's a way for our industry to grab onto that wave, it will really help everybody in this room and every company in our industry. So let's talk about growing and spreading the wealth. First of all, when it comes to growing and spreading the wealth, what I'd like to say is that it's important that companies don't have an NIH syndrome. Does everybody know what I mean by NIH syndrome? Not invented here. It's so important that the companies, all of you that are represented today, just open up and encourage the outside to come in. Supporting and encouraging innovation, as I said, from the outside, working with young entrepreneurs, establishing investment arms for your companies so that you can help fund and nourish innovation that comes from the outside. Investing in young startup companies and supporting events with your attendance as you're doing today. So everybody benefits from this. Consumers benefit, your employees benefit, and your shareholders benefit. So with that, I'm going to let the program move on, I'm gonna introduce Adrian Rich, who's he's with Dorsey and Whitney. Adrian Rich, I know very well. He's an attorney that's helped me for the last 10 plus years on many companies that I've been involved with. He got an engineering degree in biomedical engineering at Johns Hopkins. He went to UVA Law School. Dorsey and Whitney is one of the top 100 law firms presently in the United States, and he specializes with emerging companies and venture capital. And most importantly, where's Adrian? There he is. He's a very nice guy. So with that, let's welcome Adrian and thank him for being here tonight.
Always good to be third. Well, it's wonderful to be here today, and we're thrilled to be supporting the Future in Focus again, and really happy to be speaking with you today. As Ron mentioned, I am a partner at Dorsey Whitney out of the Palo Alto office. My practice is emerging companies, very broadly defined. This gives me an opportunity to really see an awful lot of what it takes for entrepreneurs to be successful, and I'm going to speak to that briefly today. But that's not me. That's the other way. There we go. So, being in Silicon Valley, I have a very unique approach. And if you've not seen the show Silicon Valley at HBO, I definitely suggest you check it out because it is the way that we approach an awful lot of problems. It's more true than we'd like it to be. Apparently, we have not taken training on the remote. I apologize. Do you want to move it forward, Richard? Can you get us back to the right slide now? Too many buttons. If this were wearable, it'd be a lot easier, I'm sure. I would just be swiping. There we go. All right. But first, an update. Many of you were here last year, and I spoke vociferously about crowdfunding and how important it was for startups and the opportunities for innovation. So I wanted to give everyone just a brief update on how things are going. Well, it looks like maybe I was right. Trends show the crowdfunding to surpass VC in 2016. And you can see here this beautiful graph shows the blue is crowdfunding, the red is VC. We've had an awful lot of increase in VC funding, but boy, the slope of that crowdfunding line looks really nice. Unfortunately, that's not the entire story. The average crowdfunding campaign right now averages $7,000 and takes about 9 weeks. And the reason for this is that crowdfunding has not really taken off for equity. It has been a significant player for consumer debt. For example, one website, the Lending Club, did $2 billion in crowdfunded consumer debt last quarter. We can see there's an opportunity, but it's not ready for prime time for equity. Crowdfunding is a very broadly defined concept, which includes consumer lending, as I mentioned, incentives-based, you've probably seen or hopefully even tried out Kickstarter, equity-based, and donations. In fact, crowdfunding started out with people trying to raise a little bit of money to help social causes or a little bit of money in microfinance transactions and has grown to a tremendous size. $60 billion anticipated for this year, more than $30 billion last year. What makes it the crowd is it's from anyone. Rich or poor, doesn't matter. Historically, under US laws, it's been very difficult to raise from the crowd from people who didn't meet a certain standard, which we call the accredited investor. Hopefully, that's going to go away, but to date it has not. The reason it hasn't is the laws have not kept up with the innovation in financial products. We just recently had something called Regulation 8 come out, which is designed to make it easier to raise in the crowd, but still has very significant disclosure obligations, meaning it costs $500,000 for a startup company to avail itself of Regulation 8. Startups simply don't have that kind of cash. The crowdfunding regulations that we've been waiting for from the SEC since 2012, well, we're still waiting, and we don't know when they'll come, if they will ever come, and if they'll be useful. Compare that to the way we are used to raising money, which is something called Regulation D, and we raise from very wealthy investors. Most startups are still choosing that path. Covered that, so we'll keep going. So having given a little bit of a background, an update regarding crowdfunding, I want to talk about Silicon Valley buzzwords for this year. And you've probably seen it. The most important buzzword for this year is unicorn. And the concept was, it was so unique that we would call it a unicorn. And that was a private company that had a valuation of over $1 billion. We now have 133 of them. It's become so prevalent that there is a new term, which we'll hear more of soon, the decacorn, completely made up as opposed to unicorn, which is just mythical, which will be a private company that's over $10 billion. When you take a look at the list of 133, there are a number of industries represented, but only a few that are strongly represented. Big data, e-commerce, fintech, healthcare, internet software, and social. Few of them are household names. Many of them are just trading with each other. But many of them have shockingly simple business plans. How many of you have used Uber, or Airbnb, or Blue Apron, or Instacart, or even Zocdoc? These are terribly simple business plans. And they are in shocking contrast to the true high technology plays that are on the unicorn list, like SpaceX, I'm sure you've seen about them in the news, or Theranos, a handful of other companies that are really innovating on a technology front instead of a business front. Why is this? Well, many people think that Silicon Valley is just a bunch of lemmings and we're all jumping off the same cliff. I don't think that's quite true, however. Silence speaks volumes, and we all think that it's the iPhone, right? We have an entirely new way of interacting with ourselves, with others, and with the companies that provide us goods and services. It's entirely changed the way that we order a cab, rent a room, even get the food to make our dinner. Pretty shocking. Blue Apron's the one that shocks me. I don't know if you've tried it, but it's basically $50. They send you a very small amount of food and you cook it yourself. It turns out really nicely, but $2 million valuation. You know, it's extraordinary. We believe wearables are next. It's just begun. I'm sure all of you have some kind of wearable, a Fitbit, an Apple Watch, a Samsung Watch, even Google Glass, right? There are a lot of different wearables that have come out, but we're just beginning to see the future. And one of the interesting things, and we're learning from our clients, is that there is only so much real estate for wearables. If you're wearing an Apple Watch, you're not going to want to wear a Fitbit. You're not going to want to wear something else on your other wrist. We're also learning that fashion matters an awful lot. And so a lot of wearables are not just about technology, they're also about fashion, which is very important in the eyeglass industry, as I gotta have to tell you. We think there's a lot to be learned from mobile success as you think about wearables. Because mobile success, many of the companies, it's about execution. They're using somebody else's technology. They've just pieced it together in order to create a business plan that they can use to build a company. Uber is the prototypical example. Certainly, that over time, they've developed amazing algorithms and can do much more than on day one. But initially, it was just another way to call a cab, albeit an expensive way. The other thing wearables and phones have created is the world of big data. If you're not familiar with it, please become familiar with it, because that is the future. It's been the future for the last couple of years, and it's still not figured out, because people are really trying to understand the statistics behind big data and how we can really utilize it to make good decisions. As a result, math is cool again. As I mentioned, in supporting wearable innovation, I think it's important to recognize that for many companies, the technology is not the most important component. It's the team and the execution that will define success and failure. And there's often only room for one winner. eBay is an older but great example of that. Online auctions, there used to be dozens. eBay came to be really the only winner, at least in the consumer side. It's important to recognize that startups in particular tend to be resource and relationship poor. And those are things that they need in order to execute. But money alone is not enough. So one of the things I want to take the opportunity today to speak to you about is, how do you, the people in the audience, help innovation, even if you're not running a startup yourself? Many of you will be investors. And one of the fundamental components of being an investor is to recognize that this is a marriage. It's not like investing on the stock exchange where you go in one day, you go out another day. It simply doesn't work that way. Not only can you not do that, But companies cannot grow with that kind of short-term investment horizon. It's really important that if you're going to invest in early-stage companies, that you make yourself a part of the company. Of course, you're not management, and of course, you're not an employee, but you have very valuable resources that you can make available to the company. For many, it's the relationships that they have in industry, or it's the fact that they actually are operating in industry and can provide real valuable insight into what works, what doesn't work. And if you're an investor, you should really be thinking about how can I do more than write a check. The other thing I encourage any investor in startups to recognize is that you're not just going to be writing one check. You've got to be in there for the long haul. Companies are going to have good and bad ups and downs, and successful companies are those that have convinced their investors to stick with them along the way. For corporate and strategics, it's even more interesting because you have not only money, but you also have incredible resources. Some of the bests, like J&J and Intel, have really begun to understand how they can use their own internal resources, their marketing departments, their technology departments, and the like, to assist startup companies. Now, this doesn't mean that it's a wedding already. You haven't acquired the company yet. And that's one of the things that's very difficult for corporate strategics to get comfortable with, is the fact that you're helping a startup that could conceivably sell to your competitor. But at the same time, it's those kind of relationships that make the startup itself more valuable to you and your relationship with the startup more valuable. We have seen time over time, even when we have an auction process, those corporate strategics that are with the company from day one or early on almost always win. Why do they win? They win because they have relationships with management. They win because they have a unique insight into the way the company runs. And so we have not seen a lot of times where companies have made a significant investment in startup companies only to lose it. It's only when they decided that they were no longer interested. But it's not just how you help the startups, it's how you help the people inside of the company. You have to have a culture where you reward risk takers, because it's very difficult, particularly in a big company, to be the one who stands up and says, I think this next innovation is going to be it. Because 9 times out of 10, that person's going to be wrong. But if you don't have it, or her, you're going to miss the 1 time out of 10 that can really change your company. As a proud sponsor, my primary task is to keep everybody on time. So I want to keep this short, hopefully interesting. I love innovation. I love talking about how investors and companies can support innovation. So I'm happy to have further conversations with you later today. But for now, I will say thank you, Future in Focus, and thank you for listening.
It's you, Bert.
I know. I sense it. Okay. Well, I'm going to do without the microphone. I speak loudly. Oh, we are. Well, I have to do it. It's just from heaven. Now from heaven. Okay. Where are they now? What we wanted to do at this juncture in our program is to review the progress of the 8 presentations, the 8 inventions that were presented last year at this time. And to do so, I'd like to invite up Dr. Richard Klompus, industry veteran, the producer of our show here. He's in charge of AV. And the president of Klompus Consulting. So, on that note, Richard?
Okay, can everybody hear me? Got that? Frank. Wonderful. The issue is that somebody else is jumping on our frequency in the building. That's part of the issue. That's a different topic for a different day. What I would like to do is really go through a review. Now, some of you were here last year, and you got to hear about the innovators directly from themselves. I'm going to recap for you and review, and then kind of give you a scorecard. Where are they a year later? Because succeeding in innovation is sometimes a rather difficult thing to accomplish. So, before I get started, I want to let you know I have no financial interest in any of the companies. So, what I tell you is really what I've learned and what I'm going to share with you today. Okay. Back in March of this year, Bill Gross, who founded the Idea Lab, did a talk, the TED Talk in March. And what he talked about was why companies succeed. So what he did was look at 200 companies, 100 within his group and 100 external companies. So you have 200 companies altogether. And he looked at which ones failed, put them aside, and then examined very carefully the ones that succeeded. And what he did was analyze using 5 different factors, from funding, the business model, the concept, the team that did the work, and finally the timing. And of all these 5 factors, the one that counted the most was timing. So no matter how good an innovation can be, if it's too early or too late, it may really come up against a number of obstacles. So with that in mind, let's kind of do a review down memory lane of what happened last year, and we'll give you a scorecard as where they are today. Digital Vision Systems, we had Dr. Keith Thompson come and speak. He actually won the award for the most poised for success, the innovation here last year. His product was the Vision Optimizer, and it's spelled correctly. There is no space between the N and the O. That's how they have it. This is a refracting device. It's really a refracting digital system that uses wavefront generators above the person, projects using a very bright OLED using continuously variable focus lenses. And using a relay mirror, the subject is actually able to see what the wavefront projectors create. Because of this, what it can do is a very, very accurate refraction, and also both objectively as well as subjectively. So this ultra high definition refraction is something very different. It reminds me of the older Humphrey model that was more mechanical with the Alvarez lenses where the patient would turn a knob and so forth to focus. But it has very, very precise endpoints. Thank you. Okay. So the UHD ultra high definition refraction gives you a way to go above and beyond what's been done before with quarter Doppler steps in a mechanical wheel. And I'm going to share with you a very short video clip of a refraction being done. The individual sits down, this is their alpha unit, and you actually go through and see the actual refraction take place. So here's the subject sitting down, scientist on your left, patient subject on the right. There's a tracking system that actually projects the image directly into the center of the pupil, so it follows where you're tracking. The first thing it does is permit the subject to do a unaided acuity, first right eye, then left eye. This is followed by an auto-refraction. And then when you get down to the actual manifest or subjective refraction, this is where you can get down to actually adjusting the prescription to 1/100th of a diopter. Finally, it looks at the acuities of each eye separately after the refraction. It then does a vertical and horizontal foria for eye imbalance between the eyes. And then finally, it does an acuity check at the end. It generates a significant amount of data, but from a user perspective, it's very, very simple to operate. You put your hand on the knob and you turn it, and that tells the instrument exactly what your responses are. Because of this, they can measure down to 1/100th of a diopter, and they've been able to actually prescribe to labs that have digital surfacing prescriptions down to 5/100ths of a diopter for that point. The other part of this is being able to, while the patient or subject is in the instrument, to actually project with the wavefront generators what it's like to see through a prescription, your prescription, and then simulate what it's like to have photochromic lenses or photogray lenses, and perhaps in the future, it would even permit the subject to gauge whether one progressive product in their prescription is as good as another progressive product for the individual patient or subject. The other thing I learned about it, that it was designed from the ground up to qualify for telemedicine. And you're going to see more and more of this, where the actual operator of the device may be somewhere else, almost like flying a drone. The pilot's in some bunker somewhere in Nebraska, but the actual device and the subject can be dislocated somewhere as well. The concept is you could reduce the cost. You could put this in a retail establishment, in a mall, or even a pharmacy to do refractions. What they've been able to do is demonstrate 100th of a doctor accuracy. Patients prefer the vision optimizer compared to the mechanical 4-opter. They've been able to order prescriptions down to 0.05 diopters. They've done the virtual try-on, and they've already designed the subsystems for their beta unit production. So from this perspective of looking at the vision optimizer, eye exams and refractions in the future will be both digital and internet enabled. And this is really the wave of what it's going to be like moving forward. To contact Dr. Thompson, he's in Atlanta, Georgia, on the internet and so forth with digital vision systems. You can always follow up with them, but they've made some significant progress over the past year. Next, I want to talk about LiquiLens. And LiquiLens is a concept and a company that Alan Glazier, OD. Alan is very well known for starting ODs on Facebook. He has a practice in Rockville, Maryland. His company is called Vision Solutions Technologies. What he has done is come up with an accommodating IOL, the design, that he feels works not only for cataract surgery, but also for macular disease, because it can provide potentially up to 9 diopters of ad power inside the eye. I'm going to show you just a very short clip. It's very short, but the lens itself is about 1.5 millimeters thick front to back, and this is going to be a good description and give you a way of understanding how these liquids inside create the prescription change.
The lens design has a central area which is filled with 2 immiscible, optically clear, biocompatible fluids of different densities and refractive indices. The fluids used are already approved for use in human eyes. Let's add some color to the fluid so that you can see what's happening inside the lens. When looking straight ahead, light entering the eye travels through the primary fluid, wholly within the optical zone. When looking downward, the secondary fluid with greater density and refractive index displaces the primary fluid, providing additional focus from 2.5 to 9 diopters, in a manner similar to the interplay of oil and water in a thin glass container. Its powers are governed by gravity, thus providing a full 2.5 diopters of sustained near vision, similar to the act of putting on reading glasses.
So it's fairly unique. These are 2 immiscible liquids that don't mix. They're already approved by the FDA in a very different design. Some of the benefits are that it gives you a single optic at one time to view through. So there's no mixed optics or birefringence. It's very clear, and it's completely independent of the ciliary body and its action when the lens is implanted in the sac or the bag. Alan has had 4 U.S. patents issued at this point, intellectual property. And as well as progress, in this case, the company has gone stealth. So I don't know whether or not they're moving along, they're not moving along, they've been purchased, they're whatever, I just don't know. But this is one of the progress ideas of what happens to innovation. At this point, I really don't know where the company is positioned at this point. So we're going to say stealth, we don't know. And if you need to contact Dr. Glazier, he's in Rockville, Maryland, Vision Solution Technologies. Okay, LaForge Optical. Corey Mack, actually, the CEO and head of design, is here. In the audience, Corey, where are you? There you are in the back. So if you need to talk to Corey, he's here. I'm going to kind of give you an update as to what his product is about. Corey had come up with a wonderful name a few years ago. It was called ISIS Eyewear. And because of what happened in the world, he changed the name to Shima. So this is the new name of this particular product. Certain forces are upon us and you have to make changes, okay? Now, with his product, if you look on the left, there's a camera in the bridge area and a very special prescription lens, an optical lens with matrix optics. In addition, the frame itself is where the electronics are, and especially in the temple, where you have wireless charging, you have Bluetooth, you have a speaker, you have a microphone, and a touchpad. So this truly is electronic eyewear with the full definition of electronics, power source, batteries, connectivity to your smartphone. Now, what's really different about this is the technology inside, different from anything else in the industry, that's currently being developed. On the lens side, the lens has no electronic components, but it does have special optical systems that relay an image from the frame into the periphery of the lens. So the lens can be edged, it can be surfaced, it can be AR-coated and mounted like a normal lens blank. So it's very different from other electronic systems. The lens itself is completely optical. The frame, on the other hand, has all the electronics in it. There's no electrical connection to the lens itself. Again, it's all optical. And that means that you can make a number of different designs and don't have to worry about electrically connecting the lens and frame together. Again, it's a very different concept in optics. What can it do? Well, it's got a camera, it can take pictures. It can help you answer your phone without having to put it up to your ear. But it also has the ability, with the generators inside the frame itself, to project information into the lens that the wearer perceives mainly in the periphery. So if you think about Google Glass having almost like a monitor suspended in space, think of Shima eyewear as providing contextual data in the periphery that you can see, but it's not in front, but rather on the sides. In this case, the example on the left is directions when you're driving. On the right is, again, images, Facebook, and so forth, tweets to send things out. So it's very different again, but a very innovative type of design. The milestones are that they've been able to develop a lens with the special reflective or mirror optics down to a 2.5 by 2.5 millimeter size. What that means is they began with a very thick lens blank, and they've been slowly, with research and development, getting the lens blank thinner and thinner and thinner so that it's cosmetically accepted for that part. They've already designed the Gen 1 product. They're developing frame prototypes with some very innovative designers. They've completed the Gen 1 fabrication for lenses, actually with 2 different independent lens companies. And they filed additional patent applications, which becomes very important when you create new space, that you want to make sure that you protect it and that you're able to have investment and a return at the end. The next steps for them is a beta prototype to give to their developers to continue, again, to do consumer testing. With most innovators, they're always in a series of fundraising rounds. Either they've just completed one, or they're about to start another. In this case, it would be Series A, completing it. They're going to do a limited launch in the US and finally explore some non-ophthalmic uses of this technology. So it's come a long way in the past year. For those that need to reach Corey, this is his email address. He's here today. I'd be happy to talk to you in the afternoon. He no longer lives in Pasadena. I think he's closer to LA at this point. Too hot in Pasadena. So that's LaForge Optical with Shima eyewear. Next is Innovega. This is something very, very different from Jerry Ledgerton, who really is a co-founder and director of the company. They're trying to create devices which are lightweight, but give you augmented reality. So everyone's heard about Mark Zuckerberg purchasing Oculus Rift. I think the amount was about $2 billion a few years ago. And there's a reason for that with really this virtual reality. It's totally immersive. If you ever put it on, it's a very different experience. If it's done well, you believe you're in a very different environment. It's engaging emotionally at many levels. And for many people, it's just like being there. It's a very different emotional, perceptive experience when you put these things on it, and they really do work the way they're supposed to, and you don't feel sick to your stomach. But it's almost like wearing a shoebox on your face. They're heavy, they're uncomfortable, you have a huge strap around the back. Wouldn't it be nice, however, if you could get just about a full field of view and make them lightweight, almost like spectacles? So that's really what Innovega is trying to do. Their product is called iOptic, and it comes in a variety of different sizes, but it looks more like a conventional pair of glasses that gives you augmented reality. Now, what's different about his design is that the optics in the visor or the glasses themselves must be combined with a contact lens. And it's not your average contact lens. This is a contact lens that in the very center of the lens, the center of your pupil, has a plus 60 diopter lens there. And that helps to focus on the tiny screen that's embedded in the back of the spectacles. That's a non-polarized portion. Your prescription, your distance RX, is more toward the mid-periphery of the contact lens, That's linear polarized, so that one part of your retina sees it, another part does not. And it's also a non-rotating lens, so it's more like fitting a toric lens or an astigmatic lens in the cornea. So there's an awful lot going in, but they've been able to figure out how to make the contact lens and how to make it work. This is an image, a photograph actually of one of their lenses. It gives good oxygen, and interestingly enough, with all this stuff in it, they've been able to get the manufacturing costs down to a disposable level. They're into their 4th feasibility study. They're ready to do an FDA study, and hopefully they forecasted they can begin the trial in Q1 of 2016. So it's a combination of a special pair of glasses as well as a contact lens. This is one of their smaller models for the AR Lite, again, form factor. They've had a number of patents issued. They have prototypes completed. They have a partner under contract. And what they're hoping to do next is really show this to more investors with a demonstration unit. Part of their work has also been with the government, with different projects that they can't always share, of trying to simulate, interestingly enough, that the person going into battle will be able to look up and see things and see detailed information real time. So they've got a very interesting product. They've made some significant progress over the past year. If you need to contact Jerry, he lives in Florida. He's the Chief Clinical Officer for Innovega, Inc. Okay, DRI systems. This is a system that really is designed to help individuals with low vision, with either retinal disease or optic nerve disease. This is Jerry Ogren as the president. He describes the Reveal View is the name of the product, as like a hearing aid for your eyes. It's really digital, it's electronic, but it's more like taking the Oculus Rift device and putting it on with a small battery pack and computer chip that you wear on your waist. And this allows individuals to see better that have retinal disease like macular degeneration and also visual field loss seen in glaucoma and hemianopsia. What's different about the device, it just doesn't provide magnification over the entire visual field, but it can be programmed to provide different levels of magnification to different parts of the retina. So rather than giving you the full field of just maximizing mag, it's able to kind of select where you need it and be able to deliver the optic that you need to the part of the retina that's still healthy enough to really understand it, be able to process the data. This is an image and a simulation on their part of what it's like for someone with age-related macular disease to look at TV, and it's pretty wiped out. If you were to wear their device on the right, this is what the simulation would look like using their view. Not perfect, but certainly a whole lot better. And they have some things I'm going to share with you in just a moment of how they're trying to improve the technology further to make it even more responsive to patients. So they have more patents, so they call it Foveon technology. They've developed new algorithms. It's all, again, about the science and the computers that run these things to develop better edge protection. But most importantly, they're currently doing research that would give them a more objective way of determining where and how much magnification the subject needs by doing wavefront aberrometry and really understanding how the eye is able to process information and objectively then magnify it where it needs it and don't magnify it where it doesn't. That's probably the most significant thing they've done this past year. So Jerry Ogren is in Houston. His co-founder, John Marino, VP, Vice President of Products. That's DRI Systems. Okay. eVision Smart Optics, Tony Van Houten, the CTO or Chief Technology Officer. Much of what they do is really classified. A lot of stuff they do, they can't talk about because it's government work and project work. But what they do very well is create solid-state electronic optics. And these are optics that switch focus very quickly and are relatively flat, very flat, because the liquid crystal systems are about as thin as a human hair. So they create the technology, they license and transfer it to companies that need it. They have over 550 patents in their IP portfolio. What I'm going to share with you next is progress they made on just one of the projects that they were willing to talk about, because most of them they can't and they won't. They talked last year about an electronic contact lens that can be fit and prescribed for presbyopia. We're going to hear much more about presbyopia today because it's a recurrent theme of trying to come up with new innovative solutions as to what to do about this aging change. And their feeling is that the way we think about contact lenses from a perspective of an electronic wearable device is going to change dramatically in the next couple of years. So think about this, you're presbyopic, you're in the wine aisle, you're in the supermarket, you're trying to focus on the wine and you can't see it, but you're wearing these electronic contact lenses. So you take your finger and you touch your temple, and somehow it triggers the contact lens and it focuses up close. And now you know whether you got the right bottle of wine or you don't, in this case. So that's one of the activation modes of touching your temple, turning it on, or turning it off. Pretty amazing if they can make it work. Now here's the progress they made, which I think is pretty good, quite good. They were able to make the transition from rigid contact lenses to flexible domed contact lenses. So they're making the transition from hard lenses to soft lenses. The switching speed, distance to near to distance, is now faster than what a human can focus. Quite an achievement. And finally, they've been able to get enough charge into the contact lens that it lasts a full day. Now think about that for a minute. We're used to now moving to one-day contact lenses where you wear it in the morning, throw it out at night, and now we're going to change course eventually and talk about the contact lens that you wear during the day and have to recharge at night to get it to work for the next day. So they have done a tremendous amount of work. There is so much they're doing they can't talk about, but this is one project with this one narrow scope that they're willing to share for this particular update, and I think they're doing a wonderful job. The president of the company is Joel Zychek. You need to reach him. He's in Florida along with Tony Van Houten. So I want to congratulate them on the work that they've done as well. What an achievement. And Chroma. This is a really special story. I want to spend just a few extra minutes on this one. This is Tony Dykes, the CEO. They make glasses they call color for the colorblind. Now think about this in general. In the global population, 8% of males have some type of color deficiency, but only 0.5% of females have this issue. So it's really a kind of a gentlemanly problem, and 8% really have difficulty often with reds and greens as the most common issue. So they've come up with a device after a lot of research that has a dielectric coating. It's not a dip coating that tints it. It's really almost like putting AR layers of coating on it to a very specific mix. And when you put those on and you're color vision deficient, it changes the color perception that your cones in your eyes perceive, and guess what? You get color vision back. It may not be perfect, but you get color vision back, and it tends to elicit these emotional responses in people that have never seen colors before. Their budget after the meeting last year, their marketing budget was $4,000. Okay? What they did after the meeting is they went back to their current investors and raised $150,000. That money was used to create a new finishing process. Before it was glass and plano. Now they can do polycarbonate and prescription lenses. After that, they were contacted by Vospar Paint. It's a paint company. And paint companies create paints with colors. So Valspar actually came up with $2 million to create a video and use the money to not only create it, but also distribute it to help share with the public not only about their paint, but about this concept of people discovering color for the first time. And when they showed it at the Cannes Film Festival, it made it on the short list, the Gold Lion short list, to be awarded an honor. What's most important to me, though, is the videos on YouTube or where share their personal sensory discovery. This isn't a very emotional exposure that people get that they don't expect. And I'm going to share a little bit about that as to what happens. They've had over 40 million viewers. Look at their viewers that create their own videos, post it, but people have looked at these over 40 million times. And every time I view them, I still get impressed by it. This is an article that came out just last month in the New Yorker in August about people sharing videos when they regain vision or regain hearing. This is a gentleman with 2 kids from Pennsylvania. His wife calls him Petey. He was featured in the article, and he's looking into his son's eyes and seeing his son's eye color for the first time. You're going to see the video that ends in that image in just a minute. But before I show that to you, I want to take you back in time a little bit to 1939. This is when the Wizard of Oz movie came out, and Dorothy, that lived in a very monochrome world, got taken up by the tornado and plopped down into Oz, which was a Technicolor experience. I'm going to show a very short clip, and what I want you to do is look at Judy Garland's face, and look at the expression on her face when she sees color for the first time. She's only an actress, but you're going to see the same effect in just a minute from the actual YouTube videos. There you go. So I call this, I made this up myself, I call this the Enchroma effect, right? Because they're all very similar. So here's Petey. I've edited this down, I just grabbed it off the internet. I want to give reference to it, YouTube. And his wife got Petey the Enchroma glasses. He has no idea what he's getting into. And he's got 3 kids running around, 2 of those are his. And here's this expression. It's like you literally picked them up and put them on a different planet.
Wait, you're also making me work.
Is it really different? Oh. There's just flowers we got for him.
Oh, they're all planted?
No, we just put them there because it's winter. Look at your kid's eyes, Katie. They're so pretty.
And there's the image that the New Yorker captured for their magazine article at the end of that. I want to share one more. What's interesting, when you look at a few of these, the men put them on, they tend to walk back because they can't quite process it. The other thing is there's a lot of expletives. So I picked this one out because I didn't want to embarrass anybody, but they all say very similar things, but if you hear a beep, you'll kind of know why, okay? This is a gentleman, again, color deficiency, looking for the first time at a North Carolina sunset. He has no clue what he's getting involved in by putting these on, so I'll share it with you. Again, very short.
So these are my new Chroma color for the colorblind glasses. I'm going to try them on for the first time. I was reading them first. These are my normal sunglasses. Everything's just darker.
Is it very noticeable difference?
Okay. I'm shaking.
It's pretty amazing. They have very similar responses. Tears run down their cheek. And I've prescribed almost everything after being in practice for 20 years. And I've had people very grateful because they're 3-diopter myope and they can see clearly. But I don't get this kind of response. So it's very different. They're onto something. So this is Tony Dykes, CEO of Chroma. Again, just interesting stuff to look at. Okay. Next, Encore Vision. Bill Burns is the president and CEO of Encore. His innovation actually won 2 awards, the most innovative innovation and the most disruptive. Because the concept here is that you would use a drop to once and for all treat the underlying difficulty that creates presbyopia. Instead of using an optical solution, trying to restore focusing, this goes back to the core issue of simply trying to make the lens do what it did for the first 40 or 45 years of your life. So the question that we really asked last year was, what if you could treat presbyopia with an eye drop? What would that mean? How would that change things for our industry? And from his perspective, it goes back to basic science. You take lipoic acid, change it to dihydrolipoic acid. This is absorbed through the cornea, and what it essentially does is remove some of the bonding within the lens itself and makes the lens young again. It changes it back to the way it was before it became presbyopic. Simple idea. The hard part is that they've already surpassed, they've been able to synthesize the drug, make it in adequate quantities. They did a toxicology study that passed. They have an IND, which is investigational new drug clearance obtained for the FDA, and most importantly, they have now started their human phase 1 and phase 2 trials, which means they may actually get data back at the end of the year that will begin to give them some idea as to whether or not this particular drug will change a lot of things for the eye care industry. This may very well be the sound of treating presbyopia in the future. I mean, what if you really could prescribe a drop and pretty soon people didn't need reading glasses anymore? The more I thought about that, the more it began to occur to me that this actually could be very helpful in many ways, because if a lot of people have been wearing plus 250 ad progressives and they take the drop, and now they need only a plus 1 ad, guess what? They all need new glasses, even though they're using Encore. So we don't really know what the answer is. I will say that Bill is here. He's actually going to be a part of our panel discussion this afternoon. So there may be the opportunity to ask Bill Burns some questions about Encore and where we're going. Bill, where are you here in the audience? All the way in the back. So we'll see Bill in the panel discussion later today. Bill Burns from Fort Worth, Texas. Okay, last one up. Change Cola, Jim Phillips. Change Cola is different. Jim came here because it's such an innovative concept. He delivered his own health story of running into some major health problems that were actually treated very well with omega-3 vitamin as a supplement. So from his perspective, it's kind of like on the one side, drinks we like to drink aren't very healthy for us, versus drinks that we really should have because they are healthy. And his particular Change Cola, he actually shipped cases of this in. Those of us who were here last year enjoyed Change Cola for lunch. He had cases brought in, chilled in, and everyone got to have a bottle to enjoy for themselves. But it not only has omega, it has vitamin D and vitamin E as well. The things that it tends to treat or take care of, it helps dry eye. You'll hear more and more about prescribing omega-3 for dry eye patients. It really does help the macula long term. It helps us recover from surgery a little bit faster. Those of us who are diabetic, it really works well to reduce insulin resistance. And vitamin D deficiency is actually more widespread than you would believe. Many of us spend more time indoors. You go for your physical, you have blood work done, the doc goes back and says, hey, you're vitamin D deficient. You know, how's that possible? So a lot of us need vitamin D because we just don't get outdoors perhaps as much as we used to. What you may not know about Jim Phillips is that he's a nationally recognized photographer. And what his specialty is photographing big things. He has photographed most of the NASCAR automobiles for many of their advertising campaigns. They drive cars into this huge arena, this photo lab and so forth, take photographs and so forth. So you probably have seen his work without even knowing it. Because of that relationship, he was able to have a Lamborghini branded with Change Cola this past year, and that car won the Trofeo World Championship. Because of that, he got lots of brand recognition, and Microsoft, who has a racing game for their Xbox, actually then latched onto it, and now that's going to be part of their game for this next year. And there's a lot of gamers out there, 1.2 billion or more than half are women. They drink a lot of cola. So it's a great way for him to promote this brand. And if you think, where's Jim going with this? What's happening? He passed a bunch of different tests, shelf life for the FDA. He's again into a next round of raising money, not unusual for all innovators and innovations. However, he signed a purchase order to begin to promote this and sell it Q4 of this year. That's next month in October. And has been given a green light to launch with a national retailer. So those of you who were here actually got to taste Change Cola and try some last year. It tastes really good. It tastes like the best cola you could taste, but it's actually also very healthy for you as well. So that's Jim Phillips. And I'm going to end this section by sharing a quote from Jim himself. Again, to think about where we're going in this world and what's happening with technology. In both life and business, the only thing that's guaranteed is change. And I hope for Jim's perspective, the change is Change Cola for him. So you're likely to see this at 7-Eleven or your local gas station or a number of different national distributors next year, but it's a very, very healthy drink to have. So I want to thank you for your attention for this review. It's been fun for me to go back and contact all these folks and kind of see where they are. Many have progressed. What I've learned from this, from an innovator's perspective, that you're always in a round of either having completed raising money or you're about to start your next round of raising money. You're always trying to somehow collect intellectual property and get that registered as carefully as possible to protect your invention and also your investors. And the other part is these folks are very daring. It's not a very comfortable spot to find yourself in of trying to create things out of thin air and create models and designs, electronics and eyewear that have never existed before. Think about the imagination that they had to come up with to do this, and also have the ability to stick to it, to not get frustrated, just forget it, slap it aside, and do something different. They stick with it year after year, and they've made some significant progress. So again, thank you so much for your information sitting here. I've learned a lot by doing this for you, but it's been a wonderful experience again. And today, you're going to hear 5 more innovators of ideas that literally have the potential to change the face of eye care globally. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. Am I on? I have absolutely no luck. Okay, well, thank you, Richard. I thought that was a terrific synopsis of what we did last year. I just wanted to make one comment. Corey, geez, that whole ISIS eyewear thing, geez, I'm sorry for you, but don't feel so bad. Essilor was going to introduce the Trump lens, but they had to drop it. Okay, all right, well, I tried. Okay. Well, as was evidenced by Richard's presentation, wearables are going to be a big and important part of our economy, and certainly we think of our optical marketplace. And we want to put that in perspective for you. So to do so, I'm inviting up Dr. Paul Karpecki to give us his keynote address on wearables. Paul's reputation certainly precedes him. He has authored, I think, more than 1,000 papers, and he's lectured just about everywhere one can lecture, and he's consulted with a number of companies. And I'd like to introduce him. Paul Karpecki.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. I'm honored to be here. It really is an exciting, anytime you're part of something of innovation, it's a wonderful opportunity to make your mind open up, to look at things and create opportunities. As Frank said, I've been very fortunate to get to do a lot of things in the last 20 years at the fellowship in Kansas City with some incredibly innovative individuals. who are at the time doing something like 40 to 45 different research studies at an ongoing time. So it kind of got me engulfed into that whole area. Even today, I'm probably involved in about 5 or 10 studies at any single time, about 12 right now. But the area that's always amazed me is this area of innovation. I gave my first talk on innovations in technology at an optometric meeting 18 years ago. And if I look back, and I kind of went back to some of these and looked at what was there, and honestly, it would have been a little embarrassing to think about what we were talking about. But it was innovative. Those were things that at the time were incredibly good thinking. There were things like multifocal, daily wear lenses, things, this is, believe it or not, 18 years ago, we knew these concepts. Some had already taken place, but some were in their infancy. And yet, surprisingly now, we wouldn't think of those as being anything so innovative, even though they were, and so far away in terms of when they came in. And what's changed now is just the speed of innovation. The fact that things can advance at such an incredibly fast pace makes such a huge difference in terms of the impact on our lives, and then what builds on it afterwards. So I had a couple of key quotes that just always stand out to me. And just so I don't mix here, I'll make sure I take this out here and kind of go through them, because I think they really help us to put things in perspective. Theodore Levitt said that, innovation, actually creativity is thinking up new things. That's creativity, but innovation is actually doing things differently. And it is true. It sounds subtle, but they're different things. Creativity comes to mind. Innovation is doing, is making, is changing the impact on lives. Benson never guessed who said this quote: innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. Steve Jobs. Obviously, he was a great leader. Took things to an entirely other level. But they say that the key to so much of innovation, if you look at Steve Jobs, he went through a time when things were very successful, and then things fell to the floor, and then got really successful again, and then unfortunately passed away. But, Kurt Richardson said failure is really something, the key to success is not to be afraid of failure. And Key Richardson said specifically, failure isn't just something that should be part of this. In fact, failure is a part of innovation. In fact, it's probably the most important part. And I say that to start things out because some of these technologies are out there, but they make us think about where this could fit into our world and what they can do for our eyes and for our patients. And you saw some of them that were surprisingly incredible in where they're going to get to. So I had the privilege to get to talk about wearable technology, and I'll take you through a few things here. First of all, anything that's computer-driven, but it also has to be electronic technology or computer that's incorporated into your life, that is on something existing. Everything from clothes to footwear to spectacles. We heard some of the great technologies that are playing a role there. It also would include anything that may play a role that's on a practical, believe it or not, they have stuff that are embedded into women's bras that actually can tell when a change is happening that could identify the potential for breast cancer. In fact, they did a study on 500 women, and they had an 87% success rate in determining who would go on to have that at a very early age, very early stage in the disease. So these things can be quite innovative in terms of what they do and where they affect things. We have smart watches, we've all heard about that, and it's true. A great talk at the beginning that talked about the fact that they are going to be just one place for so many of these things. And you're going to have one watch, you probably won't have a Fitbit to go along with it. How many people have a health type monitor of any sort that they use now? Either an Apple Watch, a Fitbit, Charge, HR, any of these sort of things. Wow, they said how many don't? So you see right there about 90%, 90% of hands. Well, health monitors are obviously perhaps the number one category that's getting utilized, but surprisingly enough, it's actually not the number one as a whole. Although anything in the healthcare does give you a premium. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Pedometers, activity trackers, virtual reality headsets, and Richard did a great job on talking about some of those, like Oculus Rift, and I'll go through those a little bit more. I tried not to overlap too much of what he had, so I wanted to kind of take the outskirts, but those things were really important technologies to set the tone for today. Smart clothing is really the key, though, where things are going. And not just clothing, it's accessories. It's things that you would normally have, and then the goal is to make them as small as possible so it doesn't look like you have anything different. Now, there's privacy issues or other things that may play a role, but as a whole, this thing continues to advance. And spectacles, wearable technology seems to make a lot of sense. So in our industry, it could perhaps be the most dominant thing. When we talk about putting a watch on, sure. We talk about fitting things into clothing. You could actually set things up in terms of running type outfits, and they can measure your heart rate, your pulse, and all the things that play a role. And then you take companies, we'll go into these as well, like GoPro. GoPro stock, amazingly, got up to, well, actually it's fallen about half of its value, but let's take Ambarella, the chip maker who actually put the chips in GoPro. Came out in 2013, the stock was $6 IPO. By July 2015, it's not even a year and a half later, $124. So these things have had some incredible growth. Now since then it's fallen to about 70 or 80. They've had a little bit of a slide in the last little while, but they still have huge capabilities in terms of what they do. And yet if if you look at those things, they're not really well set up. I mean, you have to have straps and levers and things that go in there, and you got to somehow fasten it in there and make it work. And I think, glasses, spectacles make sense. They're there already, sunglasses, etc. We'll talk more about that. So there's a lot of terms. When you look in this, start looking into this, that's a great thing of getting a privilege to talk about one specific area. You learn a lot. Sometimes called actually fashionable technology is sometimes a term. But I'm going to show you some things that'll make you wonder, wow, that doesn't look like it could be something that's wearable and technology and electronic and computerized and wireless, and we'll show you those things. Wearable devices, we've heard that term many times, obviously wearables, but tech talks are a term that gets utilized in terminology and even fashion electronics. So to date, there's somewhere between 350 and 400 technologies that have come out that are truly classified as wearable. And I will tell you that some of the things talked about today, like in Chrome and other things, are not on that list. So if you were to go through the actual list and you were to know the things that are happening in our industry, I wouldn't be surprised if that number is probably double of what they think. So we take those numbers and you look at an average selling price of about 300. You can find two very interesting things about this graph. The number one is that in the entertainment, the number one area is fitness. That's part and lifestyle. These are not surprising. Of course, lifestyle would include any things with the watch and things you're tracking and being able to see where they're looking for your messages and all that, Facebook and anything you want to do fits into that. That includes the watches and stuff. Fitness would be your Fitbits and your health monitors and your sleep monitors. There's so much. And so these two are number one and two, not surprising. Medical sits number three. But here's an interesting thing. The average price of any one of these wearable market technologies is about $300. But you know what the medical average price of the technologies in the medical is? About $1,100. A lot more becomes health, specifically medical related, has a premium. So there could be avenues to look at that in terms of what it delivers for patients too, because it's affecting my ability to live and to stay healthy and to see better and to do things better. It becomes much more valuable. So the potential market is hard to believe. $1.7 trillion. So you know really what $1 trillion is? Put this in perspective. But just think, if you had 1 million seconds and you counted that back, it would be 12 days ago. So that's 1 million seconds. What if you had 1 trillion seconds? How far back would you have to go? 30,000 BC. Another way of looking at that is take it in terms of money. That's the easiest way to know things and remember things. If you were to be 80 years old and you were going to save up $1 trillion, how much would you have to save every single day, every 24-hour period? $34 million a day. That's the market. And they haven't even touched on some of the technologies we're talking about today. They're not even included in these estimates. So the opportunity is absolutely enormous. Areas are going to have huge impact. They're starting to have big impacts. Those with safety. You obviously saw what happened in Ferguson and other places, and a lot of times they said, well, when we videotaped it, we could actually see what was going on. We could you're either going to be in trouble or you're going to be vindicated. It's going to be one of the two, but having the technologies plays a pretty role. Taser stock trades for a PI of 50. I mean, there's very few stocks right now, given this last little slide, that trade at a price to earnings ratio of 50 or above. It's one of them. And it has nothing to do so much with the taser instrument itself. It has to do with what? It has to do with a camera that's big and bulky, but it's stuck to a pair of sort of clear glasses, not even sunglasses, but clear glasses, and lets officers, the only people they sell it to right now, be able to videotape everything that happens during any occasion. So they pull over a vehicle, they have to approach them, they turn this thing on, and they videotape everything. And because of what's going on around the world, it's become very, very big, especially here in the U.S. Security is going to play a huge role. The ability to kind of know and see what's going on, of course, privacy concerns, military utilization alone, they estimate, could be about about half of this number. Could be as much as, $500 billion, or 500 billion. Police security, talked about is insurance monitoring, the ability to kind of know and to be able to confirm things and see what's happening. Navigation, of course, already exists. Healthcare, we talked about that having a premium and playing a bigger role. Health and fitness, we're going to go through some of these. Memory, age, organization, the ability to be on time spent, to be able to do time management, to follow things closely, to have everything in one place, to be able to organize it well. And then augmented reality and gaming and holographic imaging is supposed to be the third one on there that I brought. But those are the things that play a role. In fact, you might have heard of Microsoft Polo. Probably a company called Cascar as well that does the same thing. And that's the ability that actually, as you put these glasses on, they give you a three-dimensional look, and you can actually view on your wall what would be a television and watch any game you wanted to if you could pipe it through wireless or anything that you were to. And you could set it in any single place and leave it there. You could look at different images, you could change them. You could actually have the ability to take anything in that. But you know, if you look at the facts, that sounds very innovative, that's really exciting. You know, there's a founded company that actually did that over 5 years ago. It's a company called True Vision. What they did is they created a three-dimensional surgical suite. That is, you would look three-dimensionally, you put on your glasses, and they'd have cameras that would be set up, and on a flat screen now, 55 inches, you could look at cataract surgery. You'd actually look to such a level that you could see the depth, you could see exactly what the capsule is, where you're moving, how you're doing it, and you sit up in a regular scale. And it's augmented reality because it's not really what you would see. It can be magnified 15 times what you'd see. They're using it now in neurosurgery, where you're talking about fine little nerves. You got to get underneath them and change them and do things along those lines, and they can magnify to levels you can't normally see. And then you get overlaid. You can actually put on top of it a toric lines, and you put different things in place that can show you where the incision should be and how you correct the astigmatism and how big the angle needs to be and all the other things that play a role. And that came out 5 years ago. So some of these things now are more applicable to real world, but it doesn't mean we didn't already have some of these amazing innovations. So if you look at these different ones that kind of come up, obviously we've all heard of the new iWatch. That one wasn't too much of a surprise in terms of what it can do. There's been mixed reviews on it. Some people have said it's definitely the future, but it may not be here now. But others have said it's already starting to change how they function and having things available, what they see and what they can do. So I do think this is going to play a greater role as continue to come in. There are other ones that are available, obviously, in terms of the Fitbit technologies. And over here is the shoebox over the eye, as Richard described it, and that's the Oculus Rift. And in that technology, you actually put your phone into it. So you got to have a phone that works in that regards. Google, whatever, Android or the Mac ones using. You put it right into there. Of course, that was Google purchase. You put it into that area. Actually, Facebook bought this, isn't that right? Google, yes, Facebook. You put it right into that zone, and it allows you then to see everything in three-dimensional, and it surrounds you. So in other words, if you're watching something at a theater, you have everything like a home theater right in front of you. You actually have the ability to play games in that thing and innovate those terms, and it's wireless, and it's got this low latency, meaning that you can actually see the same thing someone else is close to seeing in terms of time when they play a role. So these things use smartphones, projector for virtual reality, download video games, watch AT movies, your own theater. They're wireless, wide field, low latency sensor tracking, meaning that one of the big issues when you're trying to work with these wearables, especially the augmented reality, is the situation where you look at something and there's a time lag between what you're seeing. And for gaming, apparently, that's a very important thing. So they found a way to do that. Some people say that was perhaps one of the most valuable technologies that existed, perhaps why Facebook bought what they did. Your upper left-hand side with this is obviously stats sports. You would wear this over top. It's kind of like a girl when you're running, or sportswear, or athletes playing football, and it'll measure everything from your level of hydration to tell you, oh, you're getting a little underhydrated, you better take something. It'll allow you to measure your speed of things, how fast you ran the 100. It'll tell you, how high you can jump. It'll go ahead and tell you your heart rate. It'll tell you your blood pressure. It'll tell you all the final stats. So you can tell if you're improving in terms of your heart rate's getting lower the more of this you do of certain things. And they say to make these wearables really phenomenal, you got to make them natural. That's why I think this whole area of spectacles is going to be so exciting, because I think it's the most natural that exists. And we'll talk about how many millions of people currently wear that. The other thing that lends itself to all of this area is that there are about, as we know, somewhere around, actually Clive would give me great answers on this, I don't worry about, I guess 2 billion people wear spectacles right now, which is fascinating. It means there's probably 2 billion people who need them who don't. In other parts of the world, it's the #1 cause for blindness is actually they just don't have refractive correction. It's not cataracts, not trachoma. They just are sitting around trying to get by in life with a +3 or 4 doctors in myopia. And amazing, all they need was a pair of glasses. There's 3 billion phones out in the world and 2 billion spectacles, which is a baffling statistic in of itself, but it tells us there is the potential to improve these things. So talk about natural. You can see this, it's just headphones. But inside those headphones, yes, you can listen to music, but at the same time, it's measuring your vital statistics, your blood pressure. It measures, again, timing and speed, number of steps, and pedometer, all those sort of things, as well as your heart rate. Carries it all through, and it's just, there's a little pack there that you snap onto the back clip. You don't see it, but it allows everything to be monitored through there in a wireless kind of way. And again, it doesn't seem abnormal. It looks like someone running with the earbuds in. Things you can place around your feet, a little bit abnormal, but they tell you maybe perhaps some more things in that regard. You can, if you're into certain apps, you can actually get a golf glove, and the golf glove on the back does have a sensor that measures your speed and your accuracy and your angle. So as you know, a really good golfer apparently keeps things exactly straight. Obviously, I'm not one of them. Keeps it straight, allows it to hit where it's supposed to and do what it does. This thing will measure that every time and give you feedback. And so during that time, you have a pretty good ability to kind of know where you're at and what's happening. There's actually 10 companies that are making sleep wearable devices, sleep tech devices, where at nighttime they monitor everything that you need to know. They tell you how many times you woke up that night. They tell you if you experienced any sort of severe things like apnea, which is kind of important too. It affects eye care. People with apnea tend to have floppy lid syndrome and other conditions that play a role in keratoconus, etc. But it also tells you how many hours you slept, and how many times you woke up, how long it took you to go to sleep. It measures your heart rate overnight, measures all kinds of things from in there. There's no less than 10 companies that have some sort of form of sleep aid, sleep analysis to help out in terms of a wearable type of technology. And they all play a role. There's actually stuff for baby. We had 3 children. We had twin girls first, and then within 2 years we had little boys. We had 3 children in 2 years. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that frequency, but I was getting, I was kind of a little later in life when I married, and I was grateful for it. In fact, my dad he had me when he was 41. I thought, gosh, I'm never going to wait that long to have children. I was 44, so we had a lot fast. But nevertheless, they now, so we have bought a monitor for our children, and basically it was cool because it was infrared, and you could actually see them, and you could put a monitor, and you could put a sound on, and you could hear what's going on up there. And of course, you'd be fixated on that when they're real little and watching them and not sleeping like you should. Well, now fast forward today to wearables. Now you can actually put something right in the crib or on the baby, but typically they recommend putting it underneath the crib that'll measure when they stop breathing. It'll talk about, it'll measure their heart rate, be able to tell their temperature, their body temperatures, and know if they've got a fever without actually doing anything at all but putting them down to let them go to sleep, and about 10 other type of items. So this is an incredible amount of technologies in wearables. They have dual fertility. It's actually, a woman would wear this anywhere on her body because it's measuring heat, and it'll tell her, the time of ovulation if you're trying to plan for pregnancy, and when to do it, and how it does this. And even apparently I don't know this one, I'm kind of worried about this one. Apparently this is one for people who are into the sex stuff that you actually, I'm not even sure where you place this thing, but apparently it'll time everything. Your timing, how long, all kinds of ways. So it exists. I put that only up there to say it exists in every field you can think of right now. They can put it on your body somewhere. It's a wearable. So, yes. So up in the left, I put on these ones to show you they're not all geeky. They're not these crazy kind of, someone came up with something way out of left field that looks like you're wearing some, shoebox on your face or on your arm or something like that. That's actually a high-tech bracelet that can monitor all kinds of things in terms of your health as well. The main part of it also has capturing. You can technically video someone and see everything going on and capture it through bracelets that you'd never know they were there. Look at these watches. These are smart watches too that do a lot of what the iWatch does. Not quite to the same extent, but a fair amount in them as well. They do all kinds of monitoring. They're meant to look stylish, be effective. This ring has the capability to do what that watch does. Exactly the same idea in terms of measuring everything going on, pulse rates. It's got video capabilities, it's got capturing, recording, you name it, and those sort of things. You can hold it out like that, and you're videotaping everything that's going on. A little creepy, a little scary. This bottom right-hand one, again, same thing. It's the technologies that come out that are considered wearable. They do a lot of tracking and monitoring, Moto 1 and Moto 2. I'd say look at those and think, wow, those are just beautiful watches. But in terms of what they can do and efficiency and what they can capture, it takes it to a whole other level. There's amazing technologies too that go even further. You can actually look at this thing called Whistle, where you put on your dog, and it essentially allows you to capture, watch where he's at, bring him in, call to him, figure out where they're at, get GPS, and that plays a role. There's something called Padlock. I don't know who would really want this thing, but it's kind of a smoking cessation. And anytime you're about to grab a cigarette, this thing electrically shocks you. You're not, electric shock waves, great. Maybe keep you from doing it, or you'll just destroy the thing. But nevertheless, these things do exist. They're supposed to do something nice when you do something right. They're supposed to shock you when you do something wrong. It's called Padlock. I'm not sure how they kind of monitor it. But there's another one that is called Smart Stop from smoking, and it actually does monitor your craving levels. Apparently it bases it on your heart rate, blood flow, and other things. So you can tell when you're craving. And it's got a built-in device that you'd wear this thing, it's kind of like a big watch. And it's got a built-in component that would actually send in nicotine into your body, even like a patch. It would actually have the ability to kind of convey it in, so you get that without having to resort to smoking. It's supposed to be called Smart Stop. There's, we talked about the T-Bra, the ability to do 500 patients, 87% success rate in diagnosing breast cancer in women. It's by a company called Circadia. We talked about Taser. I'll show you an image on that here in a second too, in terms of what they're doing. This thing in the upper left-hand corner is actually kind of a band. It almost looks like a bracelet, but once you separate it out, it actually becomes a drone. And the drone then can be programmed to do or go where you want, to take pictures where you want, to videotape, and in the future, whatever drones will continue to do can be done. It starts as a wearable, and then once you unhook it, it floats, and you can program to where you Yeah. The Scully type instruments is actually obviously a motorcycle bike helmet, and that seems like to be kind of a cool thing just in of itself for music and other things like that. But it goes well beyond that. Has the ability to kind of sense where you're at, tell you your speed, tell you what you've been doing, tell you alcohol levels. Believe it or not, you can actually measure for that in some of these things. It's got capabilities to kind of show, risk levels, what you're at, your angles, things like that on the bike, and other factors that play a role in feedback to you, put directions in it, where you're going, how you want to do it. In fact, there's actually one for welders. There's one that welders apparently have a really tough time with their welder's mask in terms of seeing where they're supposed to go and do. And by putting this wearable device in there and coding it, you can look at the right kind of light. You can actually look past the spark and the bright light, and you can look inside to see where you're supposed to put the welding. It actually gets you past that bright light that you can't see past. Apparently these welders who've used this said that they could do what they typically would take them maybe a day to do in probably about half that time, about 4 hours, because now they're looking at the right amount of things. They're eliminating the light source. So it doesn't matter which occupation you get to, there are things that play a role. It's called ITAP, it's the company that makes the welding helmet. Misfit is probably one of the leading ones in terms of your sleep apps that play a role. There's something called, and then if you want to get into really high tech and perhaps why the prices are so much more on the medical side, there's 3 companies. There's one called Balance Sense that actually you place this on a patient, and if you think they have Parkinson's disease, or maybe they've even got other issues related to balance and gait, it'll measure over the course of the day and tell you through a wireless sensor, if you really were off and what your gait was, and if they stumbled and what things have changed to know what's going on, and even some of the movements that happen related to Parkinson's disease, called Balance Sense. There's something called B-Bionic. So patients who've had amputees of their hands, it's like a glove, and you place it inside, and then it actually, through electronic sensor ability, you can actually program it to do the things you need it to do and how to do and see it. It has some remarkable touch capabilities, so it's more of it is wearable, but it's there for patients with amputees. And there's actually one that's for paraplegics that, if you go down the other side, lower body, it's called EXO, E-K-S-O, and you step into it, or they place your feet into it, I guess I should say, and it comes all the way up about mid-body, and this too could be programmed by a computer or wireless device to help you with stepping and getting around and functioning, and with your pants over top, you'd never even hardly notice. Of course, it'll get to the point, right now it still looks a little jaded as it works, but you'll get to a point where you can do that, and no one would even know, but more importantly, that person's functional. That's the thing, they could get out in real life and function and do the things, program your steps as you do it all on wireless and where you have to. You're not programming ahead of time, you can do it in real time as you move along. We talked about the sprouting and the owlet baby and those technologies, views, privacy, etc. And so, it's just a fascinating world. And the reason why we're looking at 1.7 billion is that, which companies are highly involved right now? Google, Taser, Under Armour, Nike, Garmin, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. You can go through the entire list of the top 40 tech companies, and some of them have some capacity to do it. Intel, Umbrella, etc. So one of them is really exciting, and Microsoft's doing a lot of this, is the whole world of holographic imaging. And this is wearable too, because you can place this anywhere. For one, you have something typically, you're not seeing that part here. You're seeing the projection onto your skin. So your skin becomes, or anything you want to put it on, a wall, any sort of thing, becomes the display, becomes the screen. And then you're wearing on your head actually a pair of glasses that are fairly large also, but they have that capability, and they're in 3 dimensions, and you can project it into area. You can actually widen it, make it bigger or smaller, and project it where you want to. You can interact with it if it's games. You're in this sort of new reality. And you're not, anyone else in the room doesn't see it, but you see all this stuff right where it's there. You're the only one that can see this on your arm and know the directions where you have to do. So there's a website called Microsoft Holo for hologram. If you were taking a look at that, it's got some incredible technologies of where the future is and what you can do. And if you're working on saying you're creating a new prototype for spectacles, you can in 3 dimensions adjust it right on the spot and move it how you want to and contour, send it to a 3D printer, and you get your prototype. You do the same thing with the next modifications. You can move it, you can change colors, you could look at it all, you could look it on someone's face and adjust how it is. It's all holographic, but it looks real when you look at that. It looks like it's something sitting right there on top of the patient. Taser, we talked about them having technology. They also have a wearable. We talked about their stock actually at a 50 price-earnings ratio today. And part of the reason why is not because of the Taser buzzing people. It's because they've got some of these wearable features that are being used. And all of a sudden the hot topic became police forces and police officers that need to be able to videotape what's going on. But this is actually a Taser shirt. It is wearable. You could take that little thing out of there, and it's technically a Taser. So if this woman is out running and decides around nighttime, whatever, someone comes upon her, she can take this out and tase anybody right, so put it back in. Bandico running again. Like maybe not quite so easy like that, but you get the picture. So that's what that is. And then over to this side, you know, the ability to kind of look at this is actually a bracelet we put on on too as well. It's kind of like a watching bracelet. It's extremely flat. And amazingly, this houses more computer capability than a computer 5 years ago. It's on a little band to put onto your arms. So if you look at Bandico, which has done a lot of work in the area of wearables, trying to understand it and see what they say the future, if you're going to plan for something in this area. We're going to talk about some technologies after the break that go into this in greater extent. One, obviously, it's going to have to be wearable, hence is the whole definition. It must be worn on the body throughout its use. It shouldn't be carried, taken off, utilized. It was something that feels like it's naturally there, even though some of these you'd wonder how natural they really are. But watches and spectacles and frames and all that sort of stuff are very wearable. It must be controllable, meaning you have to have the ability to kind of look at it, download what's on there, be able to analyze what's happening, use it to help you in terms of what you're trying to improve in. So it's going to be controlled by the user. It could be done either actively or passively. That means it could be sent to a separate wireless category, a wireless housing place that just measures it and looks at it and decides what to do with it, tells you what the data is, or it could be downloaded onto your computer, your iPhone, your tablet, etc. And here's the one that I think they say is going to change the world, because this one here is not being done across the board, and that's enhancing. It must augment knowledge, facilitate learning, or enhance the experience. That's the augmented component of it. So it's going to have to allow you to take something, be able to do things that you normally wouldn't be able to do without. I mean, we can take pictures, but the ability to also have it right there and have it not be detectable or something along those lines would play a role. To be able to look at this and adjust how you do something, how many times you blink at a computer, for example, or how many times to stop smoking, or any of these things, these enhanced type of components. So keep these in mind as we go through some of these eye technologies as well. So before we hit them, GoPro is an interesting one because, as we talked about, this thing has been a darling of Wall Street, and part of it is just this entire area of wearables. People understand that this is the future. They want to be part of it, they want to support it, and this had an incredible ride as it went through. And it is pretty good technology. It works on something, well, you know, YouTube is actually 30 FPS, so it would be footage per square, how's that, streams, FPS, don't know what they stand for. But basically, frames per second. So that's your maximum numbers, typical for putting something on YouTube. But these technologies go much higher. They can give you a resolution that goes way beyond anything you'd imagine seeing in terms of what it can show and where it's at. But of course, the higher the resolution, the less you can have a chance to display it. So if you're going to videotape in higher levels at slow motion, then you can increase the frames per second. And if you then slow it down, you can view it at that point. If you want to have something that you can download immediately, you got to keep it lower. So it's a little tricky. You know, it is, you get good at it if you've been doing it a while. But a lot of people who are just getting into it will say that, man, it took a long time to kind of really get it usable. And so the amazing thing is people are willing to do it. They're going to make this thing happen. They're going to figure out how. They're going to download and present videos. They become almost, really phenomenal production people. And these are just everyday people. If you look at some of the videos of people with surfing and other things, they've discovered how to maximize the capabilities of it. And you wonder if that's the kind of, input people are going to put to get this to be successful, then anything we create in this area is probably going to have a good chance. People want to make it work. I don't know, I'd have the patience to be able to know what footage and then to be able to cover that and to get the right frames per second and then to slow it down or speed it up and keep the resolution smooth. Because if you actually slow it down too much, it's not very smooth. And if you actually speed it up too much, it's disjointed and you can't bring it to any sort of other level and you can't display it anywhere. And here's the other problem. This is how you're going to mount these things. You have to either mount a three-way type of device. And this is like, for example, if you were a surfer, you could mount this to your surfboard. And that would allow you to kind of gauge where the waves are and set where you want to and position it, and then everywhere you're going, it goes. And you could also mount it to a helmet. So if you're a skier, you could place it on there and it holds its position, a hockey helmet or football, anything like that. Then you got this thing, and look at this thing. It's got a baseball cap, it's got power here, and it's got a strap in front of your camera. I think my neck would be sore just looking at that. People do these things, they utilize them, they get great technology and video off of this stuff. You put this thing over your head. I mean, that seems a little bit out of place, and huge thing over top. I mean, it's the size of my skull, and it's actually the size you put down in here, and that's where you videotape. These people are so into it, and they love it, that these things sell like hotcakes. And you've got these things you can do with shoulder straps and wear it right here. It goes everywhere that you're kind of going to show what's happening. The reason I put this in is, one, because this is considered a very innovative company, a very successful company. It's had an incredible run since its IPO. Although now it's almost back to its IPO price, we from 40 to 140 back to closer to 40 now. But the fact is that you look at this and think, wow, if this is successful, And we're talking about, remember the definition here for really successful technologies? You go back on here. It's got to be wearable and easy to wear and almost look discreet. You don't have it there. And yet it's very successful. So it tells us we got a lot of opportunity. If you get into this field, if you do something spectacular, people will adopt it, get on board. There's even one ocular fitness. So we talked about Fitbit. You put this over top of your arm or your leg, your wrist as a watch, or anything you want to do. You wear it as part of the workout exercise. There's actually some that are developed for, fitness bras and other things as well, and men vests and all these things you can use while you're working out, doing these things. And they'll do that. There's actually one already available as an ocular fitness. It's one for digital eye strain. I had no idea. I started looking into this and talked to a few people, but 20 to 30 million dry eye sufferers in the U.S. alone, according to the Beaver Dam study, have some sort of irritation, fatigue related to using computers. 60 to 90 million people suffer from dry eye syndrome, which kind of is related. They have the same symptoms. It's approximately 64 to 90% of all digital device users will complain about some sort of dry eye symptom. Dryness, grittiness, blurred vision late in the day after using a computer. 90% of Americans spend 3 or more hours on a digital device, and they will suffer from some sort of dry eye issue. Amazingly enough, there's 300 million users. Typically in North America, I think, that will spend on computers, pretty much both populations as a whole. And the average person will blink 4 times in a minute while on a digital device, 4 times. You know what an average person will blink when they're gazing around? 16. And how many times they'll blink when they're in conversation with somebody in a social setting? 30. 4. If you don't blink, those glands don't produce. Those meibomian glands. If they don't produce, they get obstruction, and then they get inflammation, and then they die off. We're seeing so much dry eye, so many issues. Those are in the contact lens world. I was looking at the statistics for contact lens wear 19 years ago. And the dropout rate of contact lenses in optometry in the United States was 18.4%. Seems like a high number. I never remember it being quite that high. And back then they said, well, that's a lot. And in fact, that's $1 billion that drops out of optometry every single year by those patients who want to be in lenses but can't, and they drop out. And they said, well, it's because we didn't have silicone hydrogel. We didn't have the right materials. We didn't have the right modalities. We didn't have daily wear. We didn't have peroxide solutions that can work in 4 hours or once in a day or all these preservative-free formats. We didn't have compatibility type things. We didn't look at all of that. Well, fast forward 18 years, 2014 data. Guess what the dropout rate was last year? GMI data. Dropout rate, 18.1%. No statistical difference. We have daily disposable. We have silicone, we have new materials, we have DT1s, we have incredible technologies, the ultra, and all kinds of these much better technologies than we've ever had before, even in multifocal formats and everything. And we got the same dropout rate. We're still dropping out $1 billion every year of people who want to be in their lenses. Here's the difference. People using computers, tablets, smartphones. And so the ability to maybe monitor this as a Fitbit may play a role. American Optometric Association surveyed optometrists and found approximately 10 million eye exams were performed annually for computer-related problems specifically. So you get this thing that's actually, technically the computer wears it, but it does download and you could read-carry and all the other things related to that. And it monitors everything, and it tells you when to step up from the computer. It monitors your eye level. It tells you how many times you're blinking. It gives you data on your blink if it wants you to, increase it. It tells you when to. Alarm goes off. It's got a timer, a seated height detector, environmental light detector. It essentially is there to try and minimize the strain during the course of the day. If you haven't blinked enough, at 10 minutes it tells you to stop and blink and get up. If you have normally, it'll give you 20 minutes and you take a break, and it then shows you on a computer, kind of what you're seeing and where your vision is and how many times you blink and how you can improve it and what your acuity's done and all these things. Contact lens wear, we just touched on this. The wearables here are enormous. There's a study that found that you can find up to about 50 different markers in the tear film. And when you start looking at what these markers are, you're going to be shocked. I mean, we kicked to some of the things. Allergy season kicks in the fall. I won't get it in the spring. Let's get in the fall. So we had our first cold spell in Kentucky, so I apologize. My nose running a little. But when they look at these wearable devices that are specifically for contact lenses, you can actually measure 5 or 6 different inflammatory proteins that are in the cornea. You can measure IgE, that's the ability to diagnose allergies. We could have trouble differentiating between allergies and dry eye. I have one of the larger dry eye clinics, I think, in the country. I have over 350 Sjogren's syndrome patients alone in it. Patients wait 4.5 months to see me. I don't never wait that long for me. I have 2 other doctors that will see patients in that clinic, and then I have other days to do other things as well, and then I have a review roll and all of that. But the point is, I take all this stuff kind of together, and I look at these patients in terms of those numbers and where they're at. And many times I'll thought it was dry eye, and I put them on an allergy drop and everything clears up. I'd love to know what that was ahead of time. I could do a little sample of their tears, and I could analyze it, know exactly what's going on, and be able to tell. Glucose. So there's measurements for potentially for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's could be in the tears. There's certainly tons of different MMP markers and inflammatory markers, and then you can eventually get to where you can find specific markers for new drugs. It's a drug called lefidogras. It's going out for first approval of a dry eye product in 15 years in the United States. It seems like in its clinical trials it's made signs in one, symptoms in another. They've done very well in terms of the data. We'll see what the FDA decides. Got a PDUFA date, meaning the FDA has to give them an answer by October 25th. We might have our first new product. But it's an LFA1 antagonist. What that means is it's got the ability to target one of the key receptors on the T cell that prevents the inflammatory cascade. Well, there are people that say you can actually find that marker already inside of certain tears to be able to know who's going to respond to that drug in the future. And you'll be able to look in different things that play a role in saliva checks and swabs that can tell you who's going to respond to certain nutrients for macular degeneration prevention. So contact lens wear makes sense. Now over here you've got actually more of a, this is a metric ability to, or Smart Vision Labs, to look in at a certain, you get a quick, it's actually based on an iPhone I should say, and you place this aberrometer, it's heart and check aberrometer, and you can measure your refraction within about a minute, and pretty accurately, in fact scary accurately. And you can come off of that, come off your contacts or prescriptions, whatever, all on a smartphone. But this is called Triggerfish, you see it here and here. This is a device that's wearable obviously, it's contact lens. It's simply a wireless monitoring system. You put this contact lens in your eye, and then you go home for 24 hours or 48 hours, and then you get a wireless reading center that measures your intraocular pressure throughout the day and throughout the night. In fact, many people feel that when a person progresses who has glaucoma, it's one of two things that are happening. Number one, they're not compliant, or number two, their diurnal pressures get too high. As at nighttime, pressure spiked to a level we did not expect, and we didn't know how to measure because they're sleeping. And we do know, based on sleep lab studies, that people do have a higher pressure at night. We have no way to measure it. So this might give us those. We might say, okay, we're not getting enough control overnight. We've got to adjust for this. Called Sensimed Triggerfish in the final stages of FDA submission. You've seen this one. It's already presented. So Google is working with Alcon on what's called a glucose monitoring contact lens. Now, there's a lot of things that'll have to go into this. In fact, I talked to some of the top experts in tear markers. The person who told me there's about 48 great markers in the tears, that eventually you'll get a panel that'll tell you exactly what's in your tears, whether it's allergy, dry eye, inflammatory cells, chlamydia, HSV, those all do show up in tears, and risk for systemic conditions, glucose. She said, but you have to normalize it against osmolarity, because if your osmolarity, that is your water content, gets too high, or too low, that is, and your salt content goes up, these numbers get really high, and in actuality, they're not that high. It's just thrown off by your disproportion of salt solution. So you have to normalize these things. So there'll be some steps that'll be necessary, but this area it will be big in the future. And it brings us to spectacle wearing devices. This fits for almost everybody here who works in this industry and plays a role. What can we do going forward? We had some great technologies already mentioned. I mean, I think the great thing about Google is that, well, there's one thing that's great, one thing surprising. When they came out with Google Glass, I thought that was the most innovative, amazing thing. Only to find out that companies like LaForge were already doing it and at much higher levels. And Innovega and other ones are playing a role. So one of the great things about Google Glass, even though they're not available right now, they got back kind of to the drawing board to try and get this. They had some field defect issue and other things that played a role. One of the great things about it was it created awareness. It took the spotlight and it put it on augmented spectacle wear, augmented reality spectacle type technology, and that was valuable. A lot of people will look at these and invest in them and see what they do. And I had a section on LaForge, but I just know it was covered, so we took that one out to kind of keep it seamless between the two. But that's the kind of technologies that really were far ahead and had abilities to do a lot of the same things and many more things on top of that play a role. That's a great thing about Google Glass. I never saw anybody come into my office with Google Glass at all in Kentucky. I guess never made there. But apparently people who live on the West Coast, and we live out on the West Coast, northern West Coast, apparently they say, yeah, these patients came in all the time. They had so many of them, they started calling them glass holes because they were just so frequent, and they had their little holes in the glass. But they were really an interesting group, and it was quite a fascinating thing, and it shed the light on where it's going. But there are a lot of technologies out there that do that. Some are cumbersome and goofy and do a lot of things. Some are more augmented reality, some you can kind of wear. Some have phones built into them on the side and other monitoring kind of devices. You can put them on and see your directions and compass and all kinds of things. But I'll tell you, the ones I'm most impressed by are more the LaForge type technologies, the Innovega. We already showed this earlier. We can combine this spectacle with this contact lens and get an augmented reality effect, be able to enhance and see things you normally wouldn't. But this could be where the big thing is. And that's this 3 super huge levels. 2 billion eyeglass wearers, but actually about 4 billion people needing it, which is amazing to me. 3.5 billion at a minimum. Means we got to do a lot more things. There are optometry giving sight and great organizations like that. I'll put a plug in for them because I'm on their board, but I think they're making a difference for those people who don't have, they're blind because they don't have spectacles. And yet there's 3 million people, 3 billion people who have smartphones or some sort of phone technology. That's the only way to kind of communicate. So there's ways to kind of eventually get all this put together. 4 billion mobile phone users, 3 billion people, there's 1 billion of glasses needs, and 2 billion currently wearing eyeglasses. A trillion photos. Remember what a trillion was when we went over that earlier. Every day, to age 80, you'd have to save $34 million. The trillion was in seconds. You go back to 30,000 BC. There's 1 trillion photos taken each year. These are big markets, enormous. We're not talking even small kind of numbers. These are just enormous opportunities. And you try to combine it, you can do something huge. One that's creating a new opportunity that's extremely exciting too is a track that permits the attachment of wearable electronic devices on the frame of any spectacles without compromising fashion. It'd be sitting in the side, you never see it. And there you could put health monitors, heart monitors, and wireless type technologies, and anything else you so desire, because you're looking for that wearable solution that doesn't look abnormal. You know, the GoPro may be great if you're on ski slope, you're doing things because you're cool and you're young and you get all that stuff going well, but if I were to wear that in an optometry meeting, I think I'd never get bud back. I mean, these things just, you gotta be more natural in terms of what they do and where they're at. Frames continue to look like frames. This on-track system, standardized feature, can be designed into eyeglasses, temples, or electronic wearables. Permits small wearables to actually slide forward and backwards along the temple. Let me show you a little bit of this. So here's one of them on track, and you can see there in the temple area, if we magnify it, the design feature is right there. And it's frame is mobile device ready the moment you see that. Attach anything you want to that. And we talked about a ton of things that might make sense, a ton of ways to do this. But some of the exciting ones really might be this universal track, of course. You get many fashionable frames. You do this in sunglasses. Imagine if you had a contraption there built in your sunglasses that had a monitor built into it and told you when your sun tan lotion was likely to expire and you're going to get burned, you need to put it back on. So there's a little remote sensor to do that. And those will apply. They're UV meters. They're easy to monitor. You can tell when you've gone too far when you have to reapply certain situations based on your system. You could have a snooze alert that detects when the driver's falling asleep. So you have your glasses or your driving glasses and you start to fall asleep and this alarm goes off immediately. It notices you're getting drowsy and scares the heck out of you and go get more coffee. Small ultra compact cameras that can take pictures that you'd never notice. They're so small you can just slide it up, slide it back. Talk about some technology that might do that between you. And there's nothing. So right now I've had times where my children do something incredibly cool and funny and I'm looking for my phone, I pull it out and I try to get it up. Oh darn, I gotta swipe my pad, put my code in there and I put it on and finally I get there and they're doing something else. It'd be great to just be able to go picture taken on right out of there as we had before. So you can slide this along the temple. It's actually a camera, front to back, and front here, and then slide it into position and take your picture. So you don't want it on all the time. You don't have to. If you wanted to, you had the capability to move it up and be camera ready. Perhaps the biggest advance, though, is electronic wearable technology in one specific area, and that's power. You know the reason why the smartphone isn't any smaller? They, well, of course, want to make them smaller. They want screen size nice, but they'd love to make things as small as possible. Why some of these cameras aren't small enough yet, like the ones you saw here. Why the Tesla, when it first came out, didn't feel like it was going to be something that would grab hold like it had today. It was because of the battery. That was always the big cost. It's not going to be long enough, and if it is going to be too huge, it's going to take up half the size of the car. And that's why the original cars that were hybrids were very small. And electric cars were tiny because they knew the battery was the limiting factor to all these things. Well, imagine that in the future, you can use something like Tech, recently developed, creates a wireless mobile power hotspot to charge devices while you wear it on your eyewear. That is, if you're taking your phone and you're making a call, this thing is powering your phone at the same time. It's right there, it's built in, you can have it. You can put it beside something at night and it powers it overnight if you don't want to have it on your face or your skull. That is, you just take it out, you put it by your phone, and your sunglasses are now powering your phone or your tablet or anything along those lines. The future really is wearables will shrink in size. They'll become so unnoticeable we'll never know they're there. And I talked about issues that they will. Charge will be there while you wear them. There's going to be a day where you don't have wires and don't have things connected, that one will charge the other and simultaneously keep it. And that's the big limiting factor of phones right now. They're trying to find a way to get a longer battery life. Well, this is the key. You need something around it. You can battery life it into a frame. And then you take this, combine it, never need wires, never need anything else. I'll leave you with a couple things. I'll tell you a couple things right as I leave in here. The key, I think, to innovation and the ability to make a difference in this area for all of you, and that's why you're here. You're the leaders in the profession. You're the leaders in the industry. Is really to never let anything get in the way. That is what I mean by that is failure should never be the main factor for playing a role. You've heard Edison's story where he's tested 1,000 things and someone interviewed him and said, you know, you failed 1,000 times, why are you still doing this? He said, I didn't fail, I know 1,000 things that won't work for a filament for the ball. We've all heard that. But I'll tell you a few other stories that really surprised me. You know, Van Gogh only sold one painting during his life. Okay. It was to a friend for about the equivalent of $50 today. One. And yet he painted 800 paintings. And today you can't get a painting of his for under $5 or $6 million. At minimum, some consider 50 to 100 million. For most of them, some are priceless. 800. J.K. Rowling, you know, the author there. He wrote a book, or she wrote a book, yes, J.K. Rowling. She wrote a book about this young boy who was in the world of wizardry. 12 publishing houses rejected it. Of course, you know what book that ended up being. And that became, obviously, Harry Potter. You look at the history, a great one is really, to me, is the history of Abe Lincoln, greatest president ever. 1843, defeated for nomination for Congress. 1848, he lost in terms of his for trial, even being selected to be a nominee for that. In 1849, he's rejected for a local officer. In 1854, he's defeated for U.S. Senate. In 1856, he was defeated for vice president. In 1858, he again was defeated for U.S. Senate. In 1854, he'd been defeated for U.S. Senate. In between there, he lost the love of his life at the time, who he was betrothed to. He failed in business, not once, but 3 times. Lost a job in 1832, 1833, and 1836. He had a nervous breakdown at the end of 1836. He was defeated for Speaker of the House in 1838. Lost Senate 2 times. And in 1860, he was elected, and some say he's the greatest president we've ever had. Charles Schulz submitted multiple papers. He actually, in public ed, was rejected, something like 15, 20. Even in high school, he said no one would take his comics for the high school book. He interviewed Disney. Walt Disney himself interviewed him and rejected him. And of course, he made the Snoopy series and everything that he played a role. Jack London, greatest author, has actually received 600 rejection slips before he sold his first book. Considered one of the greatest authors in U.S. history. Point to all this stuff is there's incredible things out there. And if you can think it, as Ron said, if you can dream it, it can be a reality today. The key is to keep at it. The key is to stay innovative, continue to look cool, continue to allow failure to not just be part of the process, but to be a necessity to success. You carry all these things, you can have a huge impact on yourselves, the industry, and ultimately our nation and our population. Thank you.
Sorry, trying to put new lens here.
Okay, we're going to break right now for 15 minutes. When we return, When we return, we're going to start the presentations of the new innovations for 2015. Please remember you have the ballots on your tables, and my guys are going to be coming around before our next meeting to collect them and assess them. Thanks. See you in 15 minutes.
Alright, so we're trying to do a wide angle lens here, but it's not, doesn't seem to be working.
2, 1, and 2. Turn it off.
That's exactly right. That's how I go to dinner.
1, 2. 1, 2. I was hearing ringing. 1, 2. Test it. 1, 2. Somebody's ringing. 1, 2. 1, 2. Testing 1. 1, 2. What's yesterday? 1, 2. Thank you. 1, 2. Thank you.
I'll talk to you. I'm going to backlogs of like wasn't catching most of the stage. It's not.
I don't mind, it's my charge.
This is the one machine I have because you have mine. So I don't know what. But like it's still on. We're clearly not ready for
Let's just switch on mine.
Okay.
Because I'm taking this one overnight.
Alright, we're gonna take a quick break and we'll be right back shortly. Hold on.